The moment I sank into the plush seat of row 14 on what I thought was my flight home, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Can't wait to see you at the engagement party, babe. Mom's already decorating the house." I smiled weakly, but as the plane taxied down the runway and I glanced at the destination on the screen, New York instead of Dallas, panic set in. This wasn't my flight. But before I could even unbuckle, the man next to me turned with a grin that lit up the cabin. "First time flying into the Big Apple? You look like you've seen a ghost." His voice was warm, confident, the kind that made strangers feel like old friends in seconds. I stared at him, heart hammering, trying to process how I had ended up here. "My name is Emmanuel Hayes, 28, accountant in Chicago, the guy who always did exactly what was expected. Boarding the wrong plane at O'Hare because I was distracted by a last-minute work call wasn't supposed to happen. Not to me. I think I'm on the wrong flight," I muttered, gripping the armrest. The man chuckled softly, his light brown hair catching the overhead light. He looked about 30, with kind hazel eyes and a jawline that could have been carved from marble. "Happens more than you'd think. Name's Xavier Bennett. Photographer. Heading back to Brooklyn after a shoot in Chicago." "You, Emmanuel." "Just Emmanuel." I didn't offer more. Sarah's text still glowed on my locked screen. Xavier didn't push. Instead, he leaned back and started talking about the city we were flying toward, the way the skyline looked at dusk, the little coffee shop in Williamsburg that made the best pour-over. His stories flowed easily, pulling me in despite myself. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about the engagement ring burning a hole in my carry-on or the way my parents' voices always carried that quiet expectation. Settle down, start a family, be the son they raised. 2 hours in, the conversation shifted. Xavier mentioned a recent breakup with his ex, a guy named Marcus who couldn't handle the travel schedule. He said it casually, like it was the most normal thing in the world. My stomach flipped. I'd never heard a man speak so openly about loving another man. My cheeks burned. I laughed it off, changed the subject to baseball, but inside, something cracked open. By the time we landed at JFK, my original flight to Dallas was long gone. Xavier waited with me at baggage claim, even though he had none. "Look, the next flight out isn't until morning. My place in Brooklyn has a spare room. Or I can drop you at a hotel." No pressure. His offer felt too easy, too kind. I should have said no. Instead, I heard myself say yes. We took the subway, the city rushing past in a blur of lights and noise. Xavier's apartment was small but filled with framed photographs, city streets at dawn, couples laughing in parks, moments that felt alive. He ordered Thai food, and we ate on the couch, talking until the sky turned pink. He asked about my life in Chicago, and I gave him the polished version: steady job, fiancé, supportive family. The lies tasted bitter, but I couldn't stop them. When I finally lay down in his guest room, the ceiling fan spinning lazily above me, I couldn't sleep. Xavier's laugh echoed in my head. For the first time, the weight I'd carried for years, the secret I'd buried since college, felt like it might have a name. I stared at the wall, heart racing, wondering what would happen if I ever let myself say it out loud. The next morning, Xavier made coffee and suggested we walk the Brooklyn Bridge before my rescheduled flight. 1 hour. Then you're free to disappear back to your perfect life. His smile was teasing, but his eyes held something deeper, like he already saw the cracks in my story. I followed him out the door, telling myself it was just a detour. I had no idea this single wrong turn was about to rewrite every plan I'd ever made. We stood at the center of the bridge, wind whipping around us, the Manhattan skyline glittering across the water. Xavier pointed out his favorite buildings, then turned to me. "You know, most people who board the wrong flight spend the whole time panicking. You seem different. Like maybe you needed to be here." I swallowed hard. He had no idea how right he was. Back at the airport later that afternoon, we exchanged numbers. "Text me when you land safe," he said, pulling me into a quick hug. His arms felt solid, safe. I boarded the correct plane this time, but the seat felt emptier than ever. By the time I landed in Dallas, Sarah was waiting at arrivals with balloons and a kiss I couldn't fully return. My parents hugged me tight, talking nonstop about the wedding. I smiled through it all, but Xavier's texts were already lighting up my phone. "Missed our coffee run already. Brooklyn feels quiet without you." That night, alone in my childhood bedroom, I stared at the ceiling again. The engagement party was in 3 days. I was supposed to propose again in front of everyone, make it official. But all I could think about was the man I'd met on the wrong flight and the way he looked at me like I was worth seeing. For the first time, the secret I'd hidden for so long didn't feel like a burden. It felt like the beginning of something terrifying and beautiful. I didn't know it yet, but the real turbulence was just starting. The engagement party came and went in a haze of forced smiles and champagne toasts. My mother cried happy tears when I slipped the ring onto Sarah's finger again for the cameras. My father clapped me on the back, proud of the man I was becoming. Sarah glowed, whispering how perfect our future would be. I nodded along, but every laugh felt hollow. My phone stayed silent in my pocket because I'd turned it off. Xavier's last text still burned in my mind, thinking about that bridge walk. "You okay?" I lasted 2 whole days before I answered. "Landed safe. Party was a lot." His reply came instantly. "Sounds like you need a real conversation. Call me." We talked for 3 hours that night. He told me about growing up in California, coming out at 16, the fights with his conservative grandparents, and how photography became his escape. I listened, mesmerized. When he asked about my family, I skirted the truth again, but he didn't press. "You don't have to tell me everything yet, Emmanuel. Just know I'm here." 3 weeks later, work sent me back to New York for a client meeting. I told Sarah it was mandatory. She kissed me goodbye at the airport, completely unaware. The second I landed, Xavier was waiting outside arrivals with 2 coffees and that same easy grin. "Welcome back to the city that already knows your secret," he joked. I laughed, but the words hit harder than he realized. We spent the weekend exploring. He took me to a tiny gallery in Chelsea where his photos were on display, black and white shots of men holding hands on subway platforms. I stood in front of one for a long time, chest tight. "That's us," he said quietly, pointing to 2 figures in the background. Not literally, but the feeling. I didn't answer. Instead, I reached out and squeezed his hand for the first time. He didn't pull away. That night we walked along the High Line, city lights sparkling below. Xavier stopped under a string of fairy lights and turned to me. "You're not straight, Emmanuel. I've known since the plane. The way you look at me, it's okay. You're safe here." Tears stung my eyes. No one had ever said it out loud. I nodded, unable to speak. He pulled me into a hug, and for the first time in my life, I let myself lean into another man without shame. The next morning, guilt crashed over me. Sarah called while I was still in Xavier's kitchen wearing his hoodie. I lied about a late meeting. When I hung up, Xavier was watching me from the doorway. "You can't keep doing this to yourself." Or to her. His voice was gentle, but the truth hurt. I left for the airport promising to figure things out. On the plane home, I stared at the ring on my finger and wondered how long I could keep living 2 lives. Back in Chicago, my best friend Marcus noticed something was off. We'd been tight since college. One night over beers, he asked straight out, "You seem different since New York. Everything good with Sarah?" I brushed it off, but later that week he saw a text from Xavier pop up on my lock screen. "Miss you already." Marcus didn't say anything right away, but the look he gave me lingered. The misunderstanding started small. Sarah found a photo Xavier had sent me, a selfie of us on the bridge. She thought it was innocent, just a work friend. But the caption, "Can't stop thinking about that hug," made her ask questions. I panicked and told her Xavier was a client. The lie sat heavy between us. Meanwhile, Xavier kept texting, patient but honest. "I'm not going anywhere, but I won't be your secret forever." Then came the first real crack. My mother called to say my father wasn't feeling well, stress from work, she said. I flew home to Dallas for the weekend. Xavier offered to come with me. I said no. The distance felt safer. But when I arrived, my father pulled me aside. "Son, Sarah mentioned you've been distant. A man needs to be present for his family." His words landed like stones. That night, I lay awake, the weight of every expectation crushing me. I texted Xavier at 2 a.m. "I don't know how to do this." His reply was immediate. "Then let me help you learn." The next morning, I booked another ticket to New York. I didn't tell anyone. The plane ride felt like crossing a point of no return. When Xavier picked me up at JFK this time, he didn't ask questions. He just drove me straight to Brooklyn, put on music, and let me cry in his passenger seat. For the first time, I admitted it out loud. "I'm gay. And I'm terrified." He took my hand, and held it the whole way home. That weekend, we didn't leave the apartment much. We talked for hours about my childhood fear of disappointing my parents, the nights I prayed the feelings would go away, the way Sarah deserved better. Xavier shared his own scars, the family who still didn't speak to him, the years he spent proving he was enough. By Sunday night, something had shifted. I kissed him. It was soft, tentative, nothing like the movies, but it felt like coming home. Monday morning, reality hit. I had to fly back. At the airport, Xavier hugged me tight. Whatever happens next, you're not alone anymore. I boarded the plane with his words echoing. But back in Chicago, Marcus was waiting at my apartment. We need to talk. I saw your texts. You're seeing someone else, aren't you? His voice was cold. I froze. The secret was starting to crack open, and I had no idea how to stop it. Marcus didn't yell. He just stood there, arms crossed, disappointment carved into his face. I've known you since freshman year, man. You're about to marry Sarah, and you're texting some guy in New York? What the hell? I tried to explain, but the words tangled. He shook his head. Your parents are going to lose their minds. And Sarah, she deserves the truth. He left without another word, and the silence afterward felt louder than any argument. I called Xavier that night, voice shaking. My best friend knows. He's not taking it well. Xavier listened, calm as always. Then maybe it's time the rest of the world knows too. But only when you're ready. I'm not going anywhere. His support should have helped. Instead, guilt doubled. Sarah had started planning the wedding colors. My mother was already ordering invitations. Every text from Xavier felt like both salvation and betrayal. 2 weeks later, the real storm hit. Marcus, in a moment of what he probably thought was loyalty, called my parents. He told them I was confused and seeing someone else. My father's voice on the phone was ice. Come home this weekend. We need to talk as a family. I flew to Dallas with a suitcase full of dread. Xavier offered to fly with me again. This time I said yes. We landed together. I introduced him as a work colleague at first, but my mother's sharp eyes missed nothing. Dinner was tense. My father barely spoke. Sarah showed up halfway through, excited to see me. When she hugged me, I felt Xavier's gaze from across the table. Later that night, after everyone left, my father cornered me in the den. That photographer friend of yours. He's more than a colleague, isn't he? I couldn't lie anymore. I nodded. The silence that followed was worse than yelling. My father's face crumpled. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. Xavier waited outside in the rental car. When I climbed in, tears streaming, he didn't say a word. He just drove us to a quiet park and held me while I broke down. They'll come around, he whispered. Or they won't. Either way, you're still you. His words were the first real anchor I'd had in years. The next morning, Sarah confronted me at my parents' house. Marcus had told her everything. Her eyes were red, but her voice stayed steady. I loved you, Emmanuel. But I can't marry someone who's been lying to me for years. She handed back the ring. The pain in her face cut deeper than my father's anger. I tried to apologize, but she walked away. Watching her leave felt like losing a piece of the life I'd built to hide in. Xavier booked us a hotel room, so I wouldn't have to stay under my parents' roof. That night we sat on the balcony overlooking the city lights. I'm sorry I dragged you into this mess, I said. He shook his head. You didn't drag me. I chose to be here. Because I see you, Emmanuel. The real you. For the first time, I believed him. We stayed up talking until dawn, mapping out what came next. He offered to stay in Dallas as long as I needed. I told him I needed to face this alone first. The following day, my mother called me to the house alone. She cried, asking if she'd done something wrong, if the church had failed me. I held her while she sobbed, trying to explain that this wasn't about her. It was about me finally being honest. She didn't understand, but she didn't throw me out either. Small mercies. Xavier and I flew back to New York together 2 days later. The plane felt different this time. No panic, just quiet resolve. At his apartment, he made us dinner, and we talked about the future without secrets. For the first time, I pictured a life where I didn't have to hide. But the phone calls from home kept coming. My father demanding I fix this, Marcus sending angry texts saying I'd betrayed everyone. The pressure built like a storm cloud I couldn't outrun. Then came the turning point I never saw coming. Xavier got an offer for a 6-month photography assignment in Europe. It was the break he'd been waiting for. He told me over breakfast, eyes shining with excitement. You could come with me. We could start fresh. The idea terrified and thrilled me. But my father's health had taken a turn for the worse after our fight. The doctors said stress was a factor. How could I leave now? I told Xavier I needed time. He nodded, but I saw the hurt flicker across his face. That night, lying beside him, I realized the biggest conflict wasn't my family or Sarah anymore. It was choosing between the man I was becoming and the man everyone else needed me to be. The decision would change everything. I just didn't know which path would break me first. The Europe offer hung between us like an unopened letter. Xavier never pressured me, but every time he looked at his passport on the kitchen counter, I felt the clock ticking. Back in Chicago, my job felt meaningless. I worked through the days on autopilot, answering emails while my mind replayed every conversation with my father. He'd stopped calling. My mother sent short texts asking if I was eating. Marcus had gone radio silent. The isolation was suffocating. I flew to New York again on a Friday, needing Xavier's steadiness. He met me at the airport with flowers this time. Sunflowers, bright and unapologetic. For the guy who's learning to stand in the sun, he said. We spent the weekend in his studio while he edited photos, me curled on the couch reading. It felt domestic, peaceful. On Sunday night, he asked the question I'd been dreading. If I take the Europe job, are you coming? I stared at the floor. My dad's heart, the doctors say any more stress could be dangerous. I can't leave him like this. Xavier set his laptop aside. I understand. But Emmanuel, you can't keep putting your life on hold for people who won't accept you. His voice cracked just a little. I love you. But I won't wait forever while you hide. The word love landed soft and heavy at the same time. I hadn't said it back yet. That night I did, whispering it against his shoulder as we lay in bed. He held me tighter, but the distance between us felt wider than the ocean he might cross. Monday morning I flew home to Dallas instead of Chicago. My father was in the hospital for tests. I sat by his bed, watching the monitors beep. He looked smaller than I remembered. When he woke, he didn't yell. He just said, I don't understand it, son. But I don't want to lose you either. It was the closest thing to acceptance I'd ever heard from him. Tears burned my eyes. I told him about Xavier, about the Europe offer, about how scared I was to choose. He listened. For once, he really listened. That conversation changed something. My mother joined us later, and we talked for hours. Awkward, painful, honest hours. They didn't suddenly wave rainbow flags, but they stopped demanding I fix myself. Sarah even texted me a short message. I'm hurting, but I hope you find happiness. The weight I'd carried for years started to lift, piece by piece. I called Xavier from the hospital parking lot. I'm coming with you to Europe. If you'll still have me. The line went quiet for a second. Then his laugh broke through, warm and relieved. Pack light. We leave in 6 weeks. The next month was a whirlwind. I gave notice at my job, packed up my Chicago apartment, and spent long weekends in Dallas repairing what I could with my family. My father even met Xavier over dinner one night. It was stiff, but no one stormed out. Progress. The misunderstanding that almost derailed everything came from an unexpected place. Marcus, still angry, sent my father a screenshot of an old text where Xavier and I had joked about running away together. My father read it the day before our flight. He called me in a panic, accusing me of abandoning the family. Xavier and I were at the airport when the call came. I stepped away to answer, heart pounding. Dad, I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm finally living. He hung up. Xavier saw my face and pulled me into his arms right there in the terminal. He'll come around. Families do. We boarded the plane to Paris together, hands linked under the armrest. As the city lights faded below, I realized this was the big turning point. I had chosen myself. Chosen us. The fear didn't vanish, but it no longer controlled me. Xavier squeezed my hand. Ready for the next chapter? I smiled for the first time in weeks. With you? Always. Europe greeted us with rain and croissants and new beginnings. We found a tiny apartment in the Marais, spent days wandering cobblestone streets, nights talking about everything we'd survived. Xavier's photos started winning awards. I began freelance accounting for expats, slowly building a life that felt authentic. My mother sent care packages. My father even replied to one of my emails with a simple, proud of you, son. The words meant everything. But the past wasn't done with us yet. 6 months in, a message from Marcus arrived. He was getting married and wanted me at the wedding. As a warning, he said, not to bring Xavier. The invitation felt like a test. Xavier saw the hurt in my eyes and offered to stay behind. This is your family. I don't want to make it harder. His sacrifice broke something open in me. I told him no. You're my family now too. We flew back for the wedding. The ceremony was beautiful, but the tension was thick. Marcus barely spoke to me. Sarah was there with a new boyfriend, looking happier than I'd seen her in years. My parents sat in the front row, and when they saw Xavier beside me, my mother reached over and squeezed my hand. It was small, but it was acceptance. The reception dragged, old friends whispering, but I didn't care. I had Xavier, and for the first time, I wasn't ashamed. On the flight back to Paris, Xavier rested his head on my shoulder. You chose us. Even when it was hard. I kissed his forehead. I'll always choose us. The plane hummed beneath us, carrying us toward the life we'd built together. But deep down, I wondered if the final test was still coming. Paris became home in ways Chicago and Dallas never had. Mornings meant fresh baguettes and Xavier's camera clicking away at golden hour. Evenings were spent on our tiny balcony, sharing wine and stories. My freelance work grew. I started writing a blog about living authentically after years in the closet. Readers wrote in saying my words helped them. For the first time, my pain had purpose. Xavier's Europe assignment ended after 8 months, but we decided to stay. He landed a gallery show in London. I flew over to support him, sitting in the front row as strangers admired his work. One photo stood out, a candid shot of me on the Brooklyn Bridge the day we met. The caption read simply, "The wrong flight that led me home." I cried in the middle of the gallery. Back in Paris, my father's health stabilized. He started sending photos of the garden he and my mother were planting. One message included a note. Tell Xavier we'd like to meet him properly when you visit. The invitation felt like healing. We booked tickets for Christmas. The trip home brought both joy and old shadows. My parents greeted Xavier with awkward hugs and too many questions about photography. Marcus avoided us at the family dinner, but Sarah pulled me aside. I'm glad you're happy. Truly. Her forgiveness lifted the last heavy chain. Christmas Eve, my father raised a toast. To family, in all its forms. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. We returned to Paris lighter. Xavier proposed on New Year's Eve under the Eiffel Tower, down on one knee with a simple silver band. Marry me, Emmanuel. Let's keep choosing each other every day. I said yes before he finished the question. The ring felt right in a way the old one never had. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm until the misunderstanding that nearly shattered everything. An old college friend visiting Paris saw us at a cafe and snapped a photo. She posted it online with the caption, "Emmanuel finally living his truth." The post went viral in our hometown circle. My father called in tears. Everyone at church is talking. I thought we were past this. The pain in his voice took me back to the hospital room. Xavier watched me pace the apartment, worry etched on his face. I flew home alone this time. The confrontation was brutal. My father said he'd tried, but the public exposure was too much. My mother begged me to understand. I left their house feeling like the progress we'd made had been an illusion. On the plane back, I stared at the ring on my finger and wondered if love was worth this much hurt. Xavier met me at Charles de Gaulle with open arms. I told him everything. He listened, then said the hardest thing I'd ever heard. Maybe I should step back? Give your family time. I love you enough to let you go if it saves your relationship with them. His sacrifice gutted me. I refused. No more hiding. No more choosing. We're in this together. We spent the next month in quiet tension. Xavier threw himself into work. I wrote feverishly, pouring every emotion onto the page. Then came the call that changed everything. My mother's voice was shaking. Your father had another episode. He's asking for you and Xavier. We booked the first flight out. At the hospital, my father looked frail but determined. He reached for Xavier's hand. I was wrong. Seeing you two together, it's clear this is real. I don't want to lose my son over pride. Tears streamed down all our faces. My mother hugged us both. The moment felt like the turning point we'd been fighting for. We stayed 2 weeks, rebuilding slowly. Marcus even showed up one afternoon with an apology. I was scared for you. I was wrong. The healing wasn't instant, but it was genuine. Back in Paris, Xavier and I planned our wedding for the following spring, small, in a garden outside the city, with both our families invited. The final weeks before the wedding brought one last secret to light. Xavier admitted he'd turned down a major job in Los Angeles to stay in Paris with me. I didn't want you to feel pressured. His sacrifice once again showed me the depth of his love. I promised him we'd build a life big enough for both our dreams. The night before our wedding, we sat on the balcony under the stars. Xavier took my hand. From the wrong flight to this, I'd do it all again. I smiled, heart full. Me too. The garden wedding was everything we'd dreamed. White roses lined the aisle. My parents sat in the front row beside Xavier's mother, who had flown in from California. Marcus stood as my best man, a quiet redemption. Sarah sent a beautiful card wishing us well. When Xavier walked toward me, sunlight catching in his hair, the world narrowed to just us. We exchanged vows we'd written together, promising to keep choosing honesty, even when it hurt. The reception spilled into the evening with laughter and dancing. My father pulled me aside near the end. "I'm proud of the man you've become, son." Took me too long to see it. I hugged him tight, years of tension finally dissolving. Xavier joined us, and for the first time, the four of us stood together without walls. We honeymooned in Greece, sailing between islands, talking about the future. Xavier wanted to open a studio in Paris. I wanted to expand my writing into a book. We made plans that included both our families. Holidays split between Texas and California, summers in Europe. The life we built felt earned. Back home, the book I wrote became a quiet bestseller in the LGBTQ+ community. Readers reached out saying my story gave them courage. Xavier's photography exhibit in New York featured our journey, from that first plane seat to our wedding day. The exhibit opened the same week my father visited us in Paris. He stood in front of the Brooklyn Bridge photo for a long time, then turned to me. "Thank you for not giving up on us." Years passed. We adopted a dog, traveled when we could, supported each other through the small storms life still sent. My parents fully embraced Xavier as family. Marcus became an uncle to the kids we fostered. The world didn't change overnight, but our corner of it grew kinder. One quiet evening in our Paris apartment, Xavier and I sat on the balcony watching the sunset. He rested his head on my shoulder. "Remember when you thought boarding the wrong flight was the worst mistake of your life?" I laughed softly. Now I know it was the best thing that ever happened to me. We had faced misunderstandings that nearly broke us, secrets that almost destroyed everything, betrayals from people we loved, and sacrifices that tested our bond. But every step, every hard choice, led us here, to a love that was real, accepted, and ours. Looking back at the journey from that crowded plane seat to this peaceful life, I realized the greatest growth wasn't in the happy ending. It was in the courage to keep choosing truth even when the world pushed back. Is it possible for love between two men to truly overcome every obstacle society and family place in its path? Or will some secrets always demand too high a price?